Hello and welcome to UChicago Networking Nights, Alumni in Athletics, brought to you by the Alumni Career Programs at UChicago Alumni. My name is Josh Levitt. I'm a 2010 alumnus of the college and UChicago staff member, also proudly representing hometown heroes, Bronx Bombers. Through our alumni career programs, it is my pleasure and responsibility to help provide opportunities for lifelong learning, professional development, and community connection among my fellow Maroons. Our Networking Night series brings alumni together within and across industries as we learn more about each other's journeys into multifaceted fields. This evening, you'll hear from 4 alumni and 1 soon-to-be alumnus from different academic programs within the university who are all finding and creating paths for themselves in the sports world. Then we'll network with one another, that is, build our roster of Maroon connections. We'll record this part of our session and then turn off the recording for networking chats. Please feel free to be on camera or off camera as you prefer. Of course, don't hesitate to drop questions in the chat. Reliably, some of you UChicago alumni have sent me questions in advance. Thank you for those. We'll try to cover as many as possible. So I am delighted to kick things off by introducing Sarah Toussaint, class of 2000 from the college. While she specialized in public policy studies, Sarah has been making her mark as an entrepreneur in athletics. Among key positions she's played in the career game, she co-owns the North Carolina Courage of the National Women's Soccer League and sits on the board for the Marketing Jersey, a Latino-owned sports and entertainment consultancy and talent agency. It's extra special that she joins us this evening, not only because she has served as Associate Director of Alumni Relations at the University of Chicago, but also because she is stepping into yet another role as UChicago's new Alumni Board President. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Josh. I am super psyched to be here. I'm so excited that everybody is joining us today. I would hope to get an opportunity to learn and meet from everyone who's here tonight. So I know athletics and sports may not be top of mind or a top of mind association with the University of Chicago, but I hope that a lot of us know that there's such a rich history of athletics at the University of Chicago, starting with everything from like the first Heisman winner in football to a founding member of the Big Ten in college athletics. I don't know if you can see the C here, right? That was the original C that many professional sports teams have adopted. And we've had a couple of players be drafted into professional sports. So excited to see Wilson on here. I'm so excited to see Wilson on here. But before I heard of Wilson, a friend, a mutual friend of John here and myself, Mark Mosier, he was drafted to the Giants back in '97. So like we've got this like rich history here, and I'm excited to talk to this group about it. I see some folks also in the room, friends and names I'm familiar with also in the sports world. So I can't wait for us to get to know them a little bit more too. Okay, so Josh gave you a little bit of my background. I'll do a very quick overview of kind of where I started. My first job on campus, work study, was actually in the athletics department. I actually scouted kind of talent for basketball and baseball teams. So every coach would get a sheet of one pager of a player, a student athlete, and the coaches would say, all right, we have to, you can't look at anybody who has an SAT of less than, I think it was like maybe 1,200 at the time. And so that was part of my job. Another part was cleaning out the lockers at Henry Crown and Bartlett. So that was my first sports job. Didn't think I'd ever have a career in sports, but that proved to be, just a surprise in my career path. Started off at a law firm, knew quickly I was not going to law school, but they had a big sports practice, found a job at Major League Baseball, was in the commissioner's office. My job was to inform minor league players when they got caught with certain prohibited substances. So that was not entirely fun. While at the commissioner's office, I got to speak with folks like Kim Ng, which I hope people are familiar with. She's class of 1990 and the first female GM of any professional sports team, also the first Asian woman, which is really exciting. Didn't really love baseball, to be honest. So I switched to Major League Soccer, got involved there, focusing on marketing, loved that. Then went off to work at a startup lacrosse team, did alumni relations for the University of Chicago for a couple of years. I was in venture capital, found my way back at Major League Soccer, this time on the commercial side as a sponsor. And just most recently became an investor in North Carolina Courage, which is a women's professional team in the NWSL. So very quick, background on me. That's kind of 20 years. Yeah, 20-year career in just, a couple of minutes. But, I think also just given this group, we know, far from the tropes of dumb jocks, the University of Chicago has metaphorically and literally fielded amazing, intelligent, brilliant players in the sports world. And so I don't know, and feel free, I don't, yeah, we're a small group right now, right? I'm just curious if you want to throw it in the chat, how many alumni do you think are currently in the sports world right now? I don't know if anybody has a guess. All right.
Let's see.
If it's go ahead.
I'm just checking. All right, let's see. We got one guess at 75. Another at 75.
Wow.
76. Okay, are we doing Price is Right rules? All right. Let's see, going with
currently
74. Okay.
Enrique, currently, yeah. Okay, so I don't know if there's any amazing guesses, and we've got an analytical group here. So by my count, Enrique, you'd be way off, and you'd be closer to John and Katie and Sean at about 70. So as far as I can tell, we've got about 70 people who've been involved in sports. And I'm excited to talk about and meet and introduce you to these three folks on our panel today. So you can meet three more. Starting with Katie Crawl. She's a Booth alum, class of, oh gosh, this year, Katie, you just graduated. Amazing, congratulations, even a few months ago. She's currently a development coach for the Boston Red Sox. I won't go too deep because I would love for you guys to talk about your career. So I'll just do top line titles. Fantastic. We got John Shuki, JD. John, tell me I said that right. Yes. Okay, great. From the law school class of 04. He currently runs Forward Progress Athletics Consulting, given his deep background in NCAA policies there. And then this is probably where I'm super excited. Growing up in Chicago, even though I'm a Southsider, I am a Cubs fan. We've got Wilson Cunningham, class of 2025. And I don't know if folks read the Chicago Tribune glowing profile of him, but I know that my friend, who is a former coach for University of Chicago baseball, was so bummed to have Wilson on his radar, only to lose him to the Chicago Cubs. So Wilson, very excited to have you here. So we'll start with some questions. I love that this is actually a smaller group so that we can have a conversation. And, I want to hear about, starting with John, if you can tell us about your career in athletics and how UChicago played a part in it.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. As Sarah said, I'm law school class of 2004. And I always thought my career path was varied, but Sarah, you got me beat for sure. So I grew up in an athletic family. My father was a high school athletic director, so I kind of just grew up in that atmosphere. It's what I knew. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated college. So I was a Division III student athlete, not at UC. I played football at Bowdoin College, Maine. So I have a thing for cold weather schools, apparently. And then I actually got a master's in sport management, and I went and worked for outside counsel for the Red Sox, who was also a professor at my program, and really got interested in the law. So, and I also really enjoyed going to school. And so I took 3 more years after a master's program, and obviously went to U of C. And so reason I chose U of C, besides its sterling academic reputation, was my girlfriend and now wife was living in Chicago. And so that that was really the driving factor. But it obviously worked out really well. Do like to share, I think, you mentioned Jay Berwanger winning the Heisman Trophy in the Big Ten in 2003. Enrique asked me, the sport management program I did was the University of Massachusetts at Amherst was the program I was in. So 2003, the University of Chicago sent a softball team to the University of Virginia softball tournament, which takes in teams from all over the country. Nearly every law school sends a team, and we made it to the finals, thanks in large part to the gentleman you mentioned before, Mark Mosier, who had played up to AA. And we were in the final against, I want to say, Arizona State. And everyone was cheering for us, yelling, "Nerds, nerds, nerds," as we were winning the championship. And so, again, just showing that UChicago can be multifaceted. So I left Chicago in 2004. I went to work at a law firm. And Sarah, I should have done that before law school, because I also quickly figured out that I did not want to practice law in a traditional sense. But I worked for a firm that represented several sports teams. So that kind of drew me to that particular firm. But I thoroughly was disgusted by law firm life. So I actually left and convinced my wife to move back to the Midwest, where I went to go work at the NCAA national office, which is in Indianapolis. And so we were only at least a couple hours from Chicago to see some old friends and classmates. And I worked there, actually started out as an investigator, which I'm happy to answer questions about, because it is as exciting as it sounds. So did infractions investigations, specifically around gambling and agents. So kind of the sexy side of things, not recruiting violations or financial aid mistakes, things like that. And then, but that was not really conducive to starting a family. I was, you get a call at 9 a.m. and you'd need to be in, just to throw a town out there, Norman, Oklahoma, by the afternoon. And so it was, but I enjoyed working at the NCAA. So I shifted over and worked in a program called the Academic Performance Program, which was just getting off its feet and was essentially holding Division I schools specifically accountable for moving their students towards graduation and ultimately graduating them. And there was a system of incentives and disincentives. So I was able to kind of be there at the beginning of that. Did that for 6, 7, 8 years, and then decided I was going to leave Indianapolis and move to Colorado, where I'm still am today. And I created a company kind of just out of nowhere to work with schools that I saw were struggling with that particular program and did not have advocates for them. So now the company is called Forward Progress. We're about 10 years in, and we work primarily with Division I schools. About 95% of our clients are Division I schools. And of those schools, we work with a lot of smaller, lower resource schools. So a lot of HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, kind of schools that can't afford to have an army of NCAA policy and compliance people. And we help out there. So for example, I don't work with Northwestern, but I work with Illinois Chicago. So that's kind of, our niche. So that's my 22 years in a nutshell as well.
Awesome. So many, got so many questions, but let's go to Katie. Katie, if you don't mind sharing, like how'd you get to where you were and what role did UChicago play?
Definitely. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks again, Josh, for organizing everything. It's been awesome so far. So Kim Eng, actually, Sarah, hired me to work at MLB. So I was an undergrad at Northwestern. I interviewed at the time for a program that would be in league economics and operations at MLB. And I remember in the interview with Kim, I was so nervous. I just blurted out at the start. I said, "Oh my gosh, you're the Michael Jordan of female sports executives. I can't believe I'm talking to you." So, and Kim's the absolute best. And I'm so excited that she got hired in Miami, 2 years ago now. So like I said, undergrad at Northwestern, and then worked at MLB in New York for 1.5 years, spent 2 seasons at the Cincinnati Reds as a baseball operations analyst. And I think the best way that I describe that, I think a lot of people in front offices do this as well. Yeah, I just refer to myself as like a Jonah Hill in Moneyball type of person, like determining who should we sign, what should we pay them, where should they play. And then began my MBA at Booth in September of 2022. So everything was supposed to be in person, but with the pandemic, it got shifted online. And the Cubs assistant GM at the time, Scott Harris, who now runs baseball ops for the Tigers, he flew back and forth from Chicago to spring training in Arizona during the year. And he was really the one who kind of encouraged me to remain in baseball while pursuing a graduate degree if I could handle it. And somehow I did. And then had like a really brief hiatus at Google on their global strategy team that I got connected with actually through some folks at Booth, and then got hired by the Red Sox last year. So just wrapped up my first season with them.
Amazing. I don't know. Well, I don't know if Sean and Katie, if you guys overlapped at all. Yeah.
Yes. Sean and I met probably like 3 years ago now. I think Sean was still at the Cubs at the time.
And go ahead, Sean.
I would have guessed like 2018 or something like that. I'm not sure. Yeah. But yeah, got to meet Katie and have followed her career since.
Fantastic. It's a small, and I think for most folks, it's the sports world is very, very tiny. We cross paths a lot. And which kind of, I have a question in the back of my head for Wilson, but right now I want to ask Wilson, wow, how'd you get here? Oh my God, amazing story. And why in UChicago? Tell us everything.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique story, I gotta say. So I played baseball pretty much my whole life. I didn't play my freshman or sophomore year of high school, for a combination of reasons. For reference, right now I'm 6'8", and then in 7th grade I'm 5'6". So growing like a weed, I'm getting hurt all the time, yada yada. And so I came back junior year. I'm like, oh, I miss baseball. I love it. And I worked really hard at it. I didn't lose too much. And all the while, I'm hunkering down in school, and that's, number one priority for me. And so after playing junior and senior year, I was fortunate enough to get the offer to play here. So I was committed to play here. In the summer before I came in for my freshman year, I'm a second year now. So a year and a half ago, I got the call from a Cubs scout, and he said, hey, I saw you pitch, blah, blah, blah. We got a dialogue going. And then long story short, they ended up drafting me. But they came to me with the plan. They said, hey, we know that you really want to go to UChicago. I told them that unless it was an absolute life-altering amount of millions of dollars, like there's no way I would pass up going to school here. It's a wonderful opportunity. So they came to me and they said, how about you do this? You still go to school 4 years, full-time, in person, but you also sign with us. And that never happens. I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? So what it means is that I go to school full-time. And when I'm not here, spring break, part of winter break, summer, I'm wherever they want me to be playing in the minors. So what it has been is I've been in Phoenix at their spring training complex. I just spent the whole summer there playing. And then while I'm here, it's like a long off season. I'm still on a throwing program, lifting program, nutrition, everything that I would be doing in the season or the off season. I'm in touch with coaches, doing all that. So I kind of have the dual life right now where I'm doing both, all the school and all the baseball, and I'm loving it.
Wilson, it warms my heart to hear you say that you're like, I don't want to give up this UChicago education, because I think for any econ majors, it's like, well, you can always go back to school, right? And so I am, at least that's what, that's what I think econ majors would say, because I remember saying, oh, I can't believe people are going to give up their education, but it's like, it's going to be there, right? And you got this one opportunity to go pro, the chances are slimmer. So I credit you. I'm almost in tears. Credit to you. And one question, where did they find, where did he see you pitching?
Well, I was fortunate enough to, the high school I went to is a pretty big baseball powerhouse. And so on my team, a bunch of big D1 commits, Vanderbilt, and, a handful of UCLA players, this and that. So, and then I'm from Orange County, California, and the baseball there is crazy. So pretty much every game I was at, there were a whole host of college and pro scouts. So that exposure was the big thing.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying, because I had this vision of a Cub Scout heading to the South Side and watching you on, off of 55th or something. And that's wrong. That was very wrong. Okay. Okay. All right. Catherine, in your experiences, which preconceptions about your part of the sports world doesn't ring true and which ones do? So, for me, it's like, oh, you get free tickets all the time, or oh, you get to watch the game all the time. And that's not always the case. So just curious, what do people think about your role? Also curious about, what your booth classmates think about your role.
They definitely wanted free tickets.
Yeah.
I think was the main draw for them. At Booth, it was really amazing because I was able to meet so many different people in industries that I didn't really have exposure to. So I think, like you said earlier, Sarah, baseball and sports as a whole can be a very small, closed ecosystem. And so part of what appealed to me about Booth was getting able to learn from people who have been at Microsoft or people who are climbing the ladder at Amazon. And I think that broadened my perspective in many ways versus just staying kind of within my own silo in baseball. I think that, there's obviously there are a lot of changing things in baseball. I think it's a testament to the Red Sox that they are willing to put someone who looks like me and sounds like me and has my background in uniform and to coach first base. I think I was told by a lot of former colleagues when I was hired, beyond the fact that you're a woman and now they're going to see you on the line fist bumping players, your expertise in the way that you can integrate information and communicate it. If you were a man, that would be a pretty revolutionary step for them to want to indoctrinate you and put you on a major league field someday. So it's been really unique. I think that we are seeing a gradual change in sports. And I think that the magnitude will hopefully, it'll only be exacerbated in the years to come.
Yeah. And remarkable, right? So can you tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be a development coach?
Definitely. So I would say the 3 realms that I focused on this year was pitch design. That was a huge priority of the Red Sox. So looking at a pitcher's mix and thinking, how can we optimize the offerings that he currently has, or what should we maybe add to his arsenal to make him more effective? So maybe we have a pitcher like Brian Van Bell, who's got a 4-seam fastball with ride, and then like a 12-6 curveball and a changeup with drop. Maybe we want to give him a 2-seam so he's got something run batter's hands in. The other would be advanced scouting. So both from a hitting and a pitching perspective, here's who we're going to face today. Here's what you should be aware of, things that you might want to look for when you're watching video. And then partnering pretty closely with our sports science and strength and conditioning folks to make sure, like Wilson referenced, in terms of throwing programs, nutrition, making sure that we can really have intersectionality and ensuring that we're communicating across lines.
Yeah, just the typical, job of a Booth alum. Got it. Okay. John, how about you? I mean, you've got another interesting, path just from the investigation standpoint. I'm sure you could write a book, but you probably
I could. I'm bound not to by confidentiality, but I could. I just have to keep it to myself. So especially at that position, there was a lot of misconceptions of what an NCAA investigator can or could do. So for example, there is no, as an investigator, you have no subpoena power, right? So you have you have to do a lot of cajoling to get people to speak to you when sometimes it's not in their best interest to do so. They're in theory bound by the NCAA rules to be upcoming or for forthcoming and upfront, but that's not always the case. So I quickly grew tired of that job because no one's ever happy to see you when you show up on campus. And generally, although I'm used to it now, having 3 children, I didn't like getting lied to all the time. And so that, again, grew old. But there was also, again, misconception. You're going to go to all the games. You're going to be, especially working at the national office, you did not have that connection to a school. And so I did go to Final Fours. That would be the one kind of cool perk of the job, and College World Series in Omaha. But there was not a lot of, tickets just flying around the office. Or I guess the other misconception is that there's these smoke-filled rooms of people that are making the choices, the decisions, but it's actually very much a membership-driven organization. So the rules are being made in, long conversations through committees. And that's a lot of the work I did was supporting committees eventually when I shifted out of investigations just to create policy. So it's essentially like a mini government is what we did.
Yeah. I'm like, I just want hints of some of these stories, but okay, I will respect any NDAs you may have signed. Wilson, again, like, I mean, you're uncommon, right? You're uncommon for a UChicago student athlete or any student athlete. You're uncommon for, I think, a draftee for any professional sports team, right? So, I mean, I'm curious about what your classmates think, and I'm curious about what your teammates think.
I mean, same thing as Katie. People are asking for free tickets. I got 4 on Saturday. No, but really, I mean, here I go to class and I'm a normal student. It's I'm planning to major in CAM, computational and applied math. I'm loving it so far. Yeah,
super easy. Yeah.
No, I'm loving it so far, but yeah, I go to class. I'm a normal student. I go to the gym and I lift with everyone else, and I do all that. And then the baseball side of things, people go to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, how do you do it? You go to school, you gotta, after this whole season, I just want to go home and sit on the couch. Your break is school." But I mean,
your
really,
break is school. They have no idea. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, really, but when I'm here, I'm just, I'm a student. When I'm there, I'm a baseball player. There's no identity crisis and anything like that. No, it's I mean, both environments have been super welcoming.
Yeah. Again, mine is, I cannot grasp what you're doing, but you seem to be handling it fairly well. And I'm just in awe of all of you, but God, I can't imagine your workload right now. It's stressing me out. No, but yeah, it sounds like you've got it covered. Wilson, I mean, gosh, you've got such a unique perspective. This is like, I have 1,000 questions, but this will be my last official question before we open it up for some Q&A. But any, I don't know, advice or suggestions or thoughts for anybody to kind of do what you're doing? Like, you're seeing all this with a smile on your face. Like, you made the time. I credit you because you also made the time to, to spend with us when you've got stuff to do. So just.
Well, I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go.
I mean, like with anything, it's just managing time. I love what I'm learning here. It's incredibly rewarding, and I love the baseball too. So that's kind of really all I need. And then the rest will fall into place. But really, I mean, on the school side of things, you go your whole life, you have scheduled classes, you have homework assignments and tests. The grades keep you accountable. I mean, you have this whole regimented thing in front of you. But with sports, it's a little more open-ended. You kind of have to give yourself accountability. You don't have grades, but you can set goals for yourself. And so for me, like, the time commitment can be a little tough for me. And I look around and see some other friends of mine who might not be doing the same things. And so for me, setting goals, by summer next year, I want to be throwing this many miles per hour faster. I think that's achievable. Well, how am I going to do it? And so having that, at my forethought, that's motivation enough for me.
Amazing. Thank you. John, how about you? Any advice for people following in your footsteps or intrigued by, this combination of law and policy governance?
Yeah. So I'd say I'll speak to college athletics and I'll talk to consulting as well. But for college athletics, what I tell anyone, and sometimes I'll get calls from folks from U of C, the law school, or the college. Don't think I've had a business school call yet, but
now they will.
The key with college, working in college athletics, is geographical flexibility, right? So if you are dead set, like, I need to live in St. Louis, well, okay, then you have, very few choices, schools to choose from. Even in college, even in a city like Chicago, there's a finite number of schools. And so what you see a lot is people will move to Arizona or Wyoming or whatever it is, put in their time there, and then when the job comes open at the location they want to be in, they're prepared to get that job. So a lot of people will be moving around the country. It's different than, say, banking, where there's banks anywhere you want to live. So that's always a key, is geographical flexibility. And I think, for me, I didn't set out leaving the law school with the idea that I was going to do what I do now. In fact, I didn't know it existed really as a career path. So I think every step of the way has helped, right? So the skills I learned in law school, the skills I even learned in that 18-month period at the law firm, but really the key for me to create kind of effective consulting company has been to have worked at the national office, right? So if you're doing your job well at any national organization, whether you're working for a league or an association or whatever the case might be, you are naturally networking, right? You are becoming a go-to person for someone who is part of your organization or an association. And so I didn't realize that I was doing that at the time, which I think is the best way to do it, right? That's subconscious networking. But always, no matter where you are, providing that great service. And now it's actually coming back because people answer my phone calls when I'm trying to market myself. But I didn't do it with that in mind, but that kind of just constantly networking by doing a good job would be the advice.
Yeah, that's a good one. Katie, again, very unique path. Any thoughts? I'm sure you've got, a ton of classmates, like, how'd you do what you're doing? Like, what if I want to do it? Or, maybe it's not, there's only how many developmental coaches are, at MLB, but what's your advice to them?
Definitely. I think, John, what you said was so eloquent, especially like being at that league office, and you are customer service in many ways for so many different entities. And then when you do hopefully like prove your worth, then they have a positive perception of you. I would say, Sarah, things that probably stand out to me. I think people might in an interview think that being the biggest fan or being able to prove their passion for the team is going to get them the job. And that's not the case whatsoever. Excuse me. So I think like as you continue to have both league offices and teams add software developers or people who are choosing between law school and Wall Street, if selling yourself in by, listing every single one of David Ortiz's most memorable home runs isn't necessarily going to land you the gig with the Red Sox. But what really I think stands out is when you can showcase your skills, when you can speak to maybe like a specialization that you have or what you anticipate being the next paradigm shifting change in the game. I think that's really where I take a step back and say, oh, wow, I need this person. Like they have, to use a booth term, they have value add. We need them.
I had to throw that in. All right, so this wraps up the official, me moderating the question, the panelists here. Josh, I know we've got some pre-submitted questions. I've got, as we're kind of going into those questions, I'm interested in the folks that are here. If you don't mind saying like where you're located, your degree, any career, what your career is right now or where you want to be. I'm just curious if we can add that in the chat, just so folks get a sense of who we are. And then I think we are going to be doing some chatting and networking in either a breakout or maybe we stay together in this room. But I would love to see where everybody's from and what they're doing or what they want to be doing, and see if there's a way we can help connect the dots with the folks that are here. Josh, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great to talk sports professions. And we have, as you said, we have some questions in advance. One was kind of a fun one. What is your favorite sport aside from the one in which you are currently a professional, and why? So how about Wilson? Aside from baseball, what else?
Aside from baseball, I'd have to go with I'd go with golf. I'm really bad at it, really bad at it. But my dad and my brother love to play it. My friends love to play it. So, I mean, really a great life skill to have to be able to play golf. I'm getting there still, but yeah, I like golf.
I want to add a spin to that. Can we say play and then watch?
Yeah, maybe okay. Play and then watch.
So golf, it sounds like golf you enjoy playing.
And then watch would be college football. Watch would be college football. My parents went to Bama, so it's pretty exciting being an Alabama fan. Yeah, I like college football over NFL. it's just a little more surprising.
Agreed.
John, how about you?
So my favorite sport to watch is hockey. I'm a big Colorado Avalanche fan, but I grew up in the Hartford area, and that was all we had really was the Hartford Whalers, for those of you who may be old time hockey fans. And so I grew up as my favorite professional team, and I've kind of rekindled that moving out to here. I'm going to be very Colorado in my answer. I'm not sure you can qualify this as a sport, but I love hiking out here. So we just take advantage of all the wonderful natural resources we have, in short driving distance from us. So we do a lot of hiking.
It's really more of a hobby, John. But, okay. Katie, how about you? Aside from
Listen, you've got to get better at golf if you're going to stay in baseball. Geez, that's all anybody
I
does.
know, especially as a pitcher too.
Yeah, I would say so. Had some offers to play golf in college, so still love it. And then in terms of watching, I do like watching the NFL. My sister, I have a twin sister who went to Northwestern with me. She covered the Packers for a year, and so she got like really deep in the gold and the green, and still follows Aaron Rodgers like he's the Pope. So I would say through her, I would say my football fandom probably grew.
Katie, where are you from? Just curious.
Right outside Chicago, Park Ridge.
Okay, so it's like hurting me a little bit by you saying that, but okay, got it. You went to
I root for the Bears. She got too deep in Titletown.
They sucked her in.
Nice. And Sarah, how about you aside from soccer?
Oh, so I grew up playing softball, being from Chicago, South Side.
Wow.
But I will say a quick story. I grew up playing 16-inch softball. Does anybody, Wilson, are you familiar with 16-inch?
I'm not.
You don't play with a mitt, my friend. And it's anyway, and so high school, I tried out for the softball team, and the coach was like, all right, put on a mitt. And I was like, what? But I did pretty well. However, I did not play at UChicago because Coach Rush was like, no, sorry. I can't remember who was the coach at the time. Anyhow, they said 6:30 a.m. practices, and that was it for me. But I love playing softball, love watching women's soccer, obviously. And tennis is a close second there. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm gonna bring in some tie in some pre-submitted questions with some that have been dropped in the chat. But for those who are looking to break into the sports world, into athletics professionally, how might one to translate skills developed outside of athletics to athletics? I think, Katie, your perspective really got us going there, that it requires more than enthusiasm for the sport or like knowledge of a particular team. So what would you say to those saying like I'm looking to transition into something in athletics? Where would you recommend they start? So I guess, Katie, since you kind of started that thread in terms of what's a misconception about getting into this field professionally.
Definitely. I think, and I'll speak to, let's say someone wants to pivot to the front office. I think there are a lot of great forums where you can publicly showcase your work. So whether it's writing an article for Fangraphs or Baseball Prospectus, or putting your code up on GitHub, like there are these really incredible, that are almost academic in nature, communities of fans who are really zealous and who will peer review your work mercilessly. And so I think through that, not only can you demonstrate your skill set rather than just saying, oh, I can create this model, you can actually do it. In terms of like coaching opportunities, I think that there are awesome volunteer assistant jobs. You may not receive compensation initially, but I think it's really valuable as you're building out your resume to be able to denote tangible things that you've done and organizations that you've worked with, not only for your own personal growth, but then someday in interviews you can cite and you can say, well, building on my time when I was a volunteer coach at Northwestern University, this is what I learned through working with Jack Dunn. So I think like being really intentional and strategic rather than just assuming you're going to send in a resume one day and then the Yankees are going to call you back.
But it could happen. Yeah, I guess build on that, if you would, John. How does one get into this world? Perhaps even as a young professional, maybe 5 years out from college, for instance. How does one position himself for success in athletics?
Yeah. I talk to a lot of people and try to figure out, is there a standard career path? How did you get where you are? I was blessed that coming from the sport management graduate program I came from, there was a really big alumni base that were willing to take my phone call, where conversely, there was not any college athletics alumni base from the law school. And so I really tapped into that. Just how did you get where you are? Ended up paying my own way to go to it's called the Sports Lawyers Association conference, and met someone there, worked at the NCAA through a mutual friend. And then I kind of walked that fine line. I'm sure everyone's done this, that fine line between networking and stalking, where you keep up with the person, but don't go overboard. But hey, I saw this in the news, or congratulations on that. And just having that name recognition when I did apply for a job there was really, really helpful. And so just having those conversations, not being afraid to reach out via LinkedIn, because most people, regardless if they're a U of C alum or any other school, have been in the position you're in. They weren't born into that job. And so they're more than willing to take 15 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is out of their day. You may have to wait a few weeks to have that conversation with you. And I think people just don't take advantage of the kindness of strangers as much as they should.
Yeah, I mean, and in that way, it sounds like some of the advice for the athletics industry is much the same for advancing in any other, that it's really a matter of developing a skill set, translating that skill set to a particular position, and then, as you're saying, like networking, just reaching out to the people whom you want to meet, who are doing the sort of work that you want to do. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah.
I'll also kind of expand that out, or maybe lend an even more specific approach. Say, for someone who wants to work with student athletes, what would be perhaps some of the things that they should know about how best to support them? I'll turn to our resident student athlete first. Wilson, as someone who works with support staff, both on the pro side, college side, and so on, what should professionals going into this field keep in mind?
Well, I mean, you have the obvious things like, access to equipment and resources. And I have all that here. That's great. But the big thing for me, I mean, the reason that I'm able to have this awesome deal is that the scout that I was talking with, and the higher ups in the organization, they saw that, okay, this player is projectable, but he really wants to go to school. Like, what can we do to fit his needs? So, I mean, the amazing thing is that they recognized my unique situation, and they were able to kind of think of a way to make that fit. I mean, every athlete is playing a sport, but every athlete has their own unique situation, their own needs. I think that was a huge thing that helped me, is just them thinking out of the box and kind of being a little flexible.
Yeah, definitely to be flexible, to be adaptable, and as you said, really just to be cognizant, receptive.
Yeah.
Exactly, because as you're saying, there's just a lot to consider, but also things that are pretty straightforward, so that you can succeed in both of those facets. And it was nice to hear that that you do balance those two sides of the equation. I know the Tribune called you the brainiac pitcher, and it sounds like that does not form any contradiction in terms for you. So that's great. then we had, I'll go one more pre-submitted question, and then Sarah, I want to make sure you get in, and then we'll have our larger conversation for everybody. But another question had to do with really kind of the landscape of the labor force in professional athletics. Can the panel speak to really just like the evolving diversity in different facets of the sports world? So Sarah, I guess why don't we start with you? And I know Katie referred to that too, and Wilson, I know you've also been thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. It's a great question, a big question. Depending on, which sport, and, when you're talking about, diversity of skill set, I think Katie's a great example of, just this really diverse, rich experience, right? That's led to her success, as development coach for the Red Sox. And where I personally come from is, also being a woman in sports, being a Latina in sports. Like there's women are, there are a few, especially in the predominantly like men's game. And then, if you're talking about Latina or people of color, even fewer, but certainly the last couple of years, huge strides in terms of opportunities and access, everything from, rotational programs at all the major leagues to organizations. Like, for example, I saw, Enrique, for example, like there's a Latinx in sports group that I'm an advisor of, because we know there's a community of Latinos in sports, but there hasn't been this kind of cohesive approach to like, how do we grow beyond maybe some of the entry level, mid kind of manager levels within the sports industry. And my perspective is also from like front office, right? I'm not an athlete, I'm not somebody on the field, I'm not a technical person, I'm not a coach. So that's where my perspective is, but there's a lot more organizations out there that are offering opportunities. So Latinx in sports is one. There's one called Sports and Entertainment Equity Network that is now a 501c3 with actually offers, for I see some in the chat looking to transition. So they offer a scholarship to UMass, where John went, as well, because it's one of the best sports management programs in the country, if not the best. And so I think that's a huge resource, and they connect people with mentors. There's women in sports and events, so it's like a networking group. And once you become a member, it becomes a pretty, kind of close community of women who try to elevate each other. So there's a lot more opportunities out there that are becoming more apparent, because I think I feel like when I started in sports back in 2004, I'm not going to count UChicago athletics, cleaning out the gym locker and scouting, but before that, it seemed like there was a lot of nepotism, quite frankly, and especially in baseball, you saw, the owner's kids or grandkids getting all these coveted positions. Kim Ng, for example, who Katie mentioned, she was an assistant GM for, 15 years before she got the GM job. And I know guys who were interns at MLB, who were interns when she was assistant GM, who became GMs before she did. And I have to say, I literally cried when it was announced that she got that GM job, just because, it had to be decades. It was personal frustration for me. I left baseball because there was no growth path for me. So I was like, I'm out. But I was really happy for her. She kept her head down and she kept doing it. I just said, I'm out, I'm gone. Not that I want to be GM, but I guess the point is there are a lot more opportunities, and people are willing to take, see potential in people, right? Rather than just say, oh, well, this is the son of this owner, right? So anyway, I got on my soapbox. I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but there's a lot more opportunities out there for diverse candidates and talent in the sports world. And the other thing I would say from a diverse standpoint, there's so many other jobs besides teams, clubs on the field. You've got law firms, you've got marketing agencies, you've got media, consultancies. There's a bunch of different paths to be in sports, which I think is also really cool.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that. The multiple senses of diversity in terms of really like what is a quite like multifaceted and complex field, right? There's so many moving parts to make sports happen, whether it's a sports enrichment program for after school, or if it's college sports or professional sports. Yeah, thank you so much. I know you have some questions that you've jotted down. I want to make sure you have a chance to ask any of the panel, Sarah.
Me? Yeah, but they're
Yeah.
like small. Like I'm curious. Sean was at the Cubs. Sean Ahmed, who we have here. And I'm just like I'm just nosing. Like was Wilson on the radar? I'm just and it's always intriguing. Or Katie was like, when you were there, was Wilson there? And so it's just really neat to. All right, so that was like a no. But there's a lot of talent out there. So that was like one like nosy question I had. I'm trying to think what else. I had a bunch. But I'd rather let's have other folks ask questions. I can keep going, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely feel free to keep keep dropping those questions in the chat. We'll definitely open up the floor for everyone to share their professional journeys and aspirations, to ask each other questions, and of course to network, to build that roster of Maroon connections. So I'm going to go back to sharing my little slideshow here. So I thought a nice prompt would be from Yogi Berra. I feel like this applies also to your career journey. You've got to be very careful if you don't know where you're going, because you might not get there. So I feel like that also applies to, really to some of the things, that Katie and John and Wilson and Sarah have all shared about acknowledging the skills that you have been developing and the areas in which you have been training, and in that way finding various paths into sports and athletics, if that's where you feel you want to go. Then I just want to review some house rules for this UChicago style networking. Really, part of the point of this is to make networking less awkward. And really our goal tonight is to turn strangers into advocates. For all the sports analysts in the house, you may want to take a data-driven approach to networking. Who are the sorts of professionals you're meeting, and what sorts of roles and so on, so that you can really develop a robust set of connections. You should use, the remaining time of this hour to diversify your circle in terms of the sorts of professionals you're meeting. This is also the time to practice. As athletes, that should be very familiar ground. Practice telling your 30-minute story. And then always be sure, to follow up both now and later. Share your LinkedIn profile in the chat, or however would be the best way to keep in touch. We're not going to do breakout rooms because we have a nice intimate group here. So we're going to do that, but certainly strategically use that chat in point 3 to share your LinkedIn profile, any resource recommendations, or just to continue contributing to the conversation. And then finally, just before we part ways at the end of the hour, I just want to highlight some ways that you can continue to reinvest in yourself with alumni career programs. First, you can subscribe to our newsletter. I send that every other week. I promise there's no spam. But otherwise, coming up tomorrow, we have an author talk called Winning at Working Parenthood with Daisy Dowling. She wrote the book Work Parents. Then next week, we have another informal networking conversation called Coffee and Conversations, where our theme will be on supervisors and leaders across different industries. And then our next UChicago Networking Night will focus on alumni in consulting. So please visit alumniandfriends.uchicago.edu for a full list of our upcoming virtual programs. Okay, now I will stop screen share. We'll also stop our recording so that we can have our freewheeling conversation. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and taking this step to advance your careers.